Part 1. The Ordinary Commute. The afternoon sun was beating down hard on the busy city streets. Cars honked their horns while people rushed to catch buses and trains. It was just another typical Tuesday in downtown Los Angeles. The heat made everyone feel tired and sticky. Rhonda stepped out of her training gym, wiping sweat from her forehead with a small towel. She had just finished a really tough workout session that lasted almost 3 hours. Her muscles ached in that good way that comes after pushing your body to its limits. The gym had been extra crowded today, with people preparing for upcoming competitions and trying to stay in shape. She looked down at her simple black workout clothes. Her t-shirt was still damp with sweat, and her gray sweatpants had small stains from the intense training. On her feet were her favorite worn-out sneakers that had seen better days. She pulled her baseball cap down low over her face, trying to hide from the bright sunlight and maybe get a little privacy too. The bus stop was just a block away from the gym. Rhonda had been taking this same route home for months now. It was much easier than driving in the crazy traffic, and she actually enjoyed the quiet time to think and relax after her workouts. Plus, parking in this part of the city was almost impossible and really expensive. As she walked toward the bus stop, she could see a small crowd of people already waiting. There was an older man in a business suit checking his phone every few seconds. A young woman with a baby stroller was trying to keep her toddler from running into the street. 2 teenagers were sharing headphones and laughing at something on their phone screen. Everyone looked tired from the day's work and heat. The city bus pulled up with a loud hiss of air brakes. It was one of those older buses that had seen thousands of passengers over the years. The paint was faded and you could hear the engine working hard as it stopped. The doors opened with a mechanical squeak that echoed down the street. Rhonda climbed the 3 steps into the bus and showed her monthly pass to the driver. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes who gave her a friendly nod. She had seen him many times before on this route. He always seemed to recognize the regular passengers and made small talk with some of them. The inside of the bus was pretty crowded for a Tuesday afternoon. The air conditioning was working, but not very well. It felt much better than the heat outside, but still warm and stuffy. Most of the seats near the front were taken by elderly passengers and people with bags and packages from shopping. Rhonda made her way down the narrow aisle, holding onto the metal rails as the bus started moving again. Her gym bag bumped against a few seats as she walked. She said sorry to a woman whose arm she accidentally brushed against. The woman smiled and said it was no problem at all. About halfway down the bus, she found an empty window seat. It was perfect because she could lean against the cool glass and watch the city go by. She sat down carefully, making sure not to take up too much space. The seat next to her was empty, so she placed her gym bag there for now. She would move it if someone needed to sit down. Rhonda reached into her bag and pulled out her white earbuds. They were a little tangled, so she spent a minute untangling them carefully. She plugged them into her phone and scrolled through her music playlist. She chose some soft instrumental music that would help her relax and think about her training session. As the music started playing, she closed her eyes for a moment. The bus was moving smoothly through the city streets now. She could feel the gentle swaying motion as the driver turned corners and stopped at traffic lights. It was actually quite peaceful, even with all the other passengers talking quietly around her. Through her earbuds, she could still hear the sounds of the bus. People were having conversations about their day. Someone was on a phone call talking about dinner plans. A mother was quietly singing to her baby to keep it calm. These everyday sounds of life always made Rhonda feel connected to her community. She opened her eyes and looked out the window at the passing scenery. They were driving through one of the busier parts of the city now. She could see office buildings with people working late, small restaurants with customers eating early dinners, and shops with colorful signs trying to attract customers. The bus stopped at several more stops along the way. New passengers got on while others got off. An elderly woman sat down across from Rhonda and gave her a warm smile. A man in work clothes sat a few seats behind her, talking on his phone about picking up his kids from school. Rhonda shifted in her seat to get more comfortable. Her legs were still feeling the effects of all the squats and lunges she had done during training. She stretched them out a little under the seat in front of her, being careful not to bother the passengers sitting there. She pulled her baseball cap down even lower over her face. Sometimes people recognized her, and while she didn't mind talking to fans, today she just wanted to rest and get home quietly. She had another early training session planned for tomorrow morning, and she needed to get some good sleep tonight. The bus was getting more crowded as they moved through different neighborhoods. More people were getting on than getting off. The conversations around her were getting a little louder as more voices joined in. Someone was listening to music without headphones, and she could hear the beat mixing with her own music. Rhonda checked her phone to see how much time was left in her ride. About 20 more minutes until her stop. She was looking forward to getting home, taking a hot shower, and making herself a healthy dinner. Maybe she would watch some fight videos later to study techniques for her upcoming training sessions. She noticed that the passenger next to her empty seat was getting fuller. She reached over and moved her gym bag to the floor between her legs, making sure the seat was completely available if someone needed it. It was just common courtesy, and her mother had always taught her to be considerate of others. The afternoon was slowly turning into evening. The sunlight coming through the bus windows was getting softer and more golden. Traffic outside was starting to get heavier as people finished work and headed home. She was glad to be on the bus instead of stuck in a car in all that traffic. Everything felt perfectly normal and peaceful. Just another routine trip home after a good workout. Rhonda had no idea that in just a few minutes her quiet ride home was about to become anything but ordinary. Sometimes life changes in an instant and you never see it coming until it's too late to prepare. Part 2. Enter the troublemaker. 3 stops later, the bus pulled up to another busy corner. The doors opened with their usual squeaky sound and several people climbed aboard. Most of them looked like typical commuters heading home from work. But one passenger was different from the rest. He was a man in his late 20s with an angry expression on his face. His business shirt was wrinkled and his tie was loose around his neck. He looked like he had been having the worst day imaginable. His hair was messy, and he kept running his hands through it in frustration. As he paid his fare, he was already complaining loudly to the bus driver about how late the bus was. The driver tried to explain that traffic had been heavy, but the man just waved his hand dismissively and stomped down the aisle. Other passengers looked up nervously as he passed by their seats. This man had indeed been having a terrible day at his office job. His boss had yelled at him in front of his co-workers for a mistake that wasn't even his fault. Then he had spilled coffee all over his desk and important papers. His computer had crashed twice, making him lose hours of work. To make things worse, his girlfriend had sent him a text message saying they needed to talk when he got home, which never meant anything good. Now he was looking for someone to take his anger out on. He scanned the bus with irritated eyes, searching for an easy target. Someone who looked weak or wouldn't fight back. Someone he could push around to make himself feel better about his awful day. His eyes landed on Rhonda, sitting quietly by the window. She looked small and peaceful with her head down, listening to music. Her workout clothes made her seem like just another gym member heading home. She appeared to be the perfect target for his frustration. He walked down the aisle and stopped right next to where she was sitting. Even though there were other empty seats on the bus, he decided to focus his attention on her area. He stood there for a moment, looking down at her with an annoyed expression. Rhonda didn't notice him at first. Her music was playing softly, and she was looking out the window at the passing buildings. She was thinking about her training session and planning what exercises she would do tomorrow. The bus swayed gently as it turned a corner, and she adjusted her position to stay comfortable. The man cleared his throat loudly, trying to get her attention. When she didn't respond immediately, he became more aggressive. He tapped his foot impatiently on the bus floor, making a loud noise that other passengers could hear clearly. "Excuse me," he said in a rude tone that was much louder than necessary. His voice carried an edge of anger that made nearby passengers look up with concern. "You're taking up way too much space with your stuff." Rhonda looked up, pulling one earbud out to hear what he was saying. She had a confused expression on her face because she wasn't sure what he was talking about. Her gym bag was on the floor between her legs and she was sitting normally in her own seat. "I'm sorry, what?" she asked politely, genuinely not understanding what the problem was. She looked around to see if she was somehow blocking the aisle or bothering other passengers. But everything seemed normal to her. "Your bag," he said, pointing aggressively at her gym bag on the floor. "It's taking up space where people need to walk. And you're sitting there like you own the whole bus. Some people have no consideration for others." This didn't make any sense at all. Her bag was tucked neatly under her legs and wasn't blocking anything. The aisle was completely clear. Other passengers were walking by without any problems. But Rhonda didn't want to cause any trouble, so she tried to be understanding. "Oh, I'm sorry if it's in the way. she said in a calm, friendly voice. She reached down and moved her bag even further under her seat, making sure it was completely out of any possible walking path. Is that better? But her polite response only seemed to make him angrier. He had been hoping she would argue back so he could have a big confrontation. Her kindness made him feel foolish, which made his anger grow even stronger. Don't give me that innocent act, he snapped, his voice getting louder. I can see right through people like you. You think you're better than everyone else, don't you? Walking around like you own the place. Other passengers were starting to stare now. An elderly woman a few seats away looked worried and uncomfortable. A man with a briefcase moved to a seat further away from the commotion. Parents with children pulled their kids closer to them. Rhonda put her other earbud away and gave the man her full attention. She could see that he was really upset about something, but she couldn't understand why he was taking it out on her. She had been nothing but polite and considerate. I think there might be some misunderstanding, she said calmly, trying to keep her voice gentle and non-threatening. I haven't done anything to bother anyone. Maybe you're having a bad day? This was exactly the wrong thing to say. The suggestion that he was having a bad day felt like an insult to him. His face turned red with anger, and his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Don't you dare try to psychoanalyze me, he shouted, causing several passengers to jump in their seats. You don't know anything about me or my day. I'm sick of people like you thinking you can just do whatever you want. The bus driver glanced in his rearview mirror with concern. He was used to dealing with difficult passengers, but this situation was escalating quickly. He considered pulling over to address the problem, but decided to keep driving and see if it would calm down on its own. Rhonda remained seated and calm, but inside she was starting to assess the situation more carefully. Her years of training had taught her to recognize when someone might become physically aggressive. This man was showing all the warning signs of someone who was about to lose complete control. Look, she said in an even quieter voice, hoping to de-escalate the situation. I don't want any trouble. I'm just trying to get home peacefully. If there's something specific I can do to help, just let me know. But he was too far gone in his anger to hear reason. His bad day at work, his relationship problems, and his general frustration with life had all built up to this moment. He was looking for a fight, and he had decided that this quiet woman was going to be his target, whether she wanted to be or not. The other passengers watched nervously, hoping someone would step in to stop what was clearly becoming a dangerous situation. But everyone was afraid to get involved with someone who was acting so aggressively. Part 3. Escalating tension. The angry man wasn't satisfied with Rhonda's polite responses. In fact, her calm behavior seemed to make him even more frustrated. He had expected her to fight back or get scared, but instead she was being reasonable and kind. This made him feel like even more of a bully, which only fueled his rage. You think you're so smart, don't you? He continued, his voice getting louder with each word. Sitting there all calm and collected like nothing bothers you. I bet you think you're better than everyone else on this bus. Rhonda looked around at the other passengers, hoping someone might help calm the situation down. She could see that people were getting uncomfortable and scared. A mother with 2 young children had moved to seats further away. An elderly man was shaking his head in disapproval but seemed too afraid to say anything. I really don't think I'm better than anyone, Rhonda replied honestly, keeping her voice low and steady. I'm just trying to mind my own business and get home. I haven't said or done anything to upset you. But the man was too angry to listen to logic. His face was getting redder, and he was starting to gesture wildly with his hands. Sweat was forming on his forehead despite the air conditioning on the bus. He looked like someone who was completely losing control of his emotions. Mind your own business? He laughed bitterly. That's rich coming from someone who's taking up half the bus with their attitude. I can see it in your eyes. You think you're tough, don't you? This comment made Rhonda pause for a moment. She wondered if somehow this man could sense that she was different from other passengers, but she was dressed in regular workout clothes and hadn't done anything to indicate her background in fighting. She decided he was just making random accusations because he was upset. An elderly woman sitting across the aisle had been watching the whole situation with growing concern. She was a grandmother of 5. And had seen enough bullies in her lifetime to know when someone was picking on an innocent person. Finally, she couldn't stay quiet anymore. Young man, she said in a firm but gentle voice, this lady hasn't done anything wrong. She's been very polite to you and you're being quite rude. Maybe you should just find another seat and calm down a little. The grandmother's intervention was meant to help, but it had the opposite effect. The angry man spun around to face her with fury in his eyes. Now he had 2 targets for his rage instead of 1. "Mind your own business, old lady," he snapped at her, his voice dripping with disrespect. "Nobody asked for your opinion. This is between me and her." The elderly woman's face showed shock and hurt. In all her years of riding public transportation, no one had ever spoken to her so rudely. She clutched her purse tighter and looked around for support from other passengers. Rhonda felt a surge of protective anger when she saw how this man was treating the sweet grandmother. Her calm demeanor started to shift slightly. She had been willing to tolerate his rudeness toward herself, but watching him bully an elderly woman was crossing a line. "Hey," Rhonda said, her voice taking on a slightly firmer tone for the first time. "There's no need to talk to her like that. She was just trying to help. If you have a problem, it's with me, not with her." The man's eyes lit up with satisfaction. Finally, he was getting the reaction he wanted. He had found a way to make this quiet woman show some emotion. Now he felt like he was winning the confrontation. "Oh, so now you want to stand up for someone?" he said with a nasty grin. "Where was all this toughness when I was talking to you? I guess you only get brave when you're protecting other people." Other passengers were starting to look around nervously. Some people were taking out their phones, probably thinking about calling for help or maybe recording what was happening. The tension in the bus was thick enough to cut with a knife. The bus driver had been listening to the commotion through his rearview mirror and decided he needed to do something. At the next red light, he turned around in his seat to address the situation. "Sir," the driver called out in a loud, authoritative voice, "I'm going to need you to calm down or I'll have to ask you to get off the bus. You're disturbing the other passengers." The angry man looked toward the front of the bus with annoyance. He didn't want to get kicked off because he still needed to get home. But he also didn't want to back down from the confrontation he had started. He was caught between his anger and his practical needs. "I'm not doing anything wrong," he called back to the driver. "I'm just having a conversation. It's a free country, isn't it? I have the right to talk to people." "You have the right to talk," the driver replied firmly, "but you don't have the right to harass other passengers. Keep it civil or get off at the next stop." The light turned green and the driver had to focus on driving again. But his warning seemed to make the situation even more tense. The angry man felt like everyone was ganging up on him now, which made him even more defensive and aggressive. He turned back to Rhonda with renewed anger. His pride was hurt because he had been called out in front of everyone. Now he felt like he had to prove that he was still in control of the situation. "See what you did?" he hissed at her. "Now everyone thinks I'm the bad guy here. You probably planned this whole thing to make me look bad." Rhonda was amazed by his twisted logic. She couldn't understand how someone could be so aggressive and then blame other people when they got called out for their behavior. But she tried to stay calm and reasonable. "I didn't plan anything," she said quietly. "I was just sitting here listening to music when you started talking to me. All I want is for everyone to have a peaceful ride home." The elderly woman was still upset about being yelled at. She had tears in her eyes and was looking around for someone to help her feel safe. A younger woman sitting nearby reached over and patted her hand gently, offering silent support. The angry man noticed this small act of kindness, and it made him even more frustrated. He felt like everyone on the bus was against him now. His paranoia was growing along with his anger, creating a dangerous combination that was about to explode. Part 4, The Fatal Mistake. The angry man was reaching his breaking point. Everything that had gone wrong in his day seemed to be focused on this one moment. His job problems, his relationship issues, and now what he saw as public humiliation on the bus had all combined into a perfect storm of rage. He stood in the aisle, swaying slightly as the bus moved through traffic. His breathing was heavy and his hands were shaking with anger. The other passengers could sense that something very bad was about to happen. The whole bus had fallen into an uncomfortable silence, with only the sound of the engine and traffic outside. Rhonda remained in her seat, still trying to keep the situation from getting worse. She had dealt with angry people before in her life, but this man seemed different. There was something unpredictable and dangerous about his behavior that made her more alert. "Look," she said one more time, trying to use her calmest voice possible. "I think we got off on the wrong foot here. Why don't we just forget about this and enjoy the rest of the ride? I'm sure you have better things to worry about than me." But her attempt at peacemaking only made him angrier. In his twisted mindset, her calmness felt like she was mocking him. He interpreted her peaceful words as a sign that she didn't take him seriously or respect his anger. "Don't you dare talk down to me," he snarled, leaning closer to where she was sitting. I'm sick of people like you thinking you can just dismiss me. You have no idea who you're dealing with. The irony of his words would become clear very soon, but at that moment he had no idea how wrong he was about not knowing who he was dealing with. Ronda was actually showing incredible restraint by staying calm in the face of his aggression. Several passengers were now openly staring at the confrontation. Some had their phones out, ready to call for help if things got physical. Others were trying to move further away from the angry man, creating more space between themselves and the potential danger. The elderly woman who had tried to help earlier was still shaken up from being yelled at. She kept looking between Ronda and the angry man, worried that the situation was going to get much worse. Her motherly instincts made her want to protect the young woman who had defended her. The bus hit a pothole, causing everyone to jolt slightly in their seats. This small bump seemed to be the final trigger for the angry man's completely lost control. In his mind, even the bus was working against him now. His rage reached a level where he couldn't think clearly anymore. "You know what?" he said, his voice now shaking with fury. "I'm tired of talking to you. Maybe you need to learn some respect the hard way." Ronda's training kicked in at this point. She recognized the tone and body language of someone who was about to become violent. Her muscles tensed slightly, and her mind began calculating distances and possible escape routes. But she still hoped the situation could be resolved without anyone getting hurt. "Please don't do anything you'll regret," she said firmly but not threateningly. "Just walk away and find another seat. This doesn't have to get any worse than it already is." Her words were like gasoline on a fire. The suggestion that he might regret his actions felt like another insult to his already damaged pride. He had passed the point where logical thinking was possible. All he could focus on was his need to dominate this woman who had somehow made him feel small. Without any warning, his leg swung forward in a sudden, vicious kick, aimed directly at Ronda's shin. The attack was completely unprovoked and caught several passengers off guard. Gasps and small screams came from around the bus as people realized the situation had just turned violent. The kick connected with Ronda's leg with a solid thud that echoed through the bus. Under normal circumstances, such a kick would have caused serious pain and probably injury to most people. The angry man expected to see her cry out in pain, maybe fall off her seat or at least show some sign that he had hurt her. But instead of the reaction he was expecting, something completely different happened. Ronda didn't even flinch. She didn't cry out or show any sign of pain at all. The kick that should have hurt her badly seemed to have no effect whatsoever. She slowly turned her head to look directly at him for the first time since the confrontation began. Her eyes were no longer calm and peaceful. They had changed into something much more focused and alert. There was a look in them that the angry man didn't recognize, but it made him feel suddenly uncomfortable. The change in Ronda's demeanor was subtle but unmistakable. Her posture shifted slightly, becoming more upright and ready. Her breathing became more controlled and deliberate. Anyone who knew about fighting would have recognized these as the signs of someone who was preparing for combat. But the angry man was too caught up in his rage to notice these warning signs. He was focused on the fact that his kick hadn't seemed to hurt her at all. This made him even more frustrated and angry. In his mind, she was somehow cheating by not reacting the way he wanted her to. The entire bus had fallen completely silent now. Even the conversations that had been happening in the back of the bus had stopped. Everyone was staring at what had just happened, trying to process the fact that they had just witnessed an assault. Some passengers were fumbling with their phones, trying to decide whether to call the police or start recording. Others were looking around for the bus driver, hoping he had seen what happened and would stop the bus to deal with the situation. The elderly woman who had been yelled at earlier was now looking at Ronda with deep concern. She had seen the kick land and was worried that the young woman might be seriously hurt, even though she wasn't showing it. But what none of the passengers knew yet was that they had just witnessed the biggest mistake of the angry man's life. He had just physically attacked someone who was more than capable of defending herself, and he was about to find out exactly who he had chosen to pick on. The moment hung in the air like a ticking bomb, with everyone waiting to see what would happen next. Part 5. The Revelation. The angry man stood there for a moment, confused and frustrated by Ronda's lack of reaction to his kick. He had expected crying, screaming, or at least some sign that he had hurt her. Instead, she was looking at him with those intense, focused eyes that made him feel strangely nervous. "What's wrong with you?" he demanded, his voice getting even louder. Are you on drugs or something? Normal people react when they get kicked. He was completely unaware that he had just made the worst mistake of his entire life. In his ignorance, he continued to escalate the situation, digging himself deeper into a hole that he would soon realize he couldn't climb out of. Ronda remained seated, but her entire body language had changed. She was no longer the quiet, peaceful passenger she had been just moments before. Every muscle in her body was now alert and ready. Her years of training had taught her to stay calm under pressure, but she was also prepared to defend herself if necessary. The other passengers were still in shock from witnessing the unprovoked attack. An older businessman near the front of the bus was already dialing 911 on his phone. A young mother was holding her child closer, trying to shield him from seeing the violence. But then something happened that changed everything. A teenage boy sitting in the back of the bus had been watching the whole confrontation with growing recognition. He was a huge fan of mixed martial arts and had been following UFC fights for years. When Ronda turned her head and he got a clear look at her face, his eyes went wide with disbelief. "Oh my God," he whispered at first, not quite believing what he was seeing. Then, as the realization hit him fully, his voice got much louder. "Oh my God, that's Ronda Rousey." The name hit the bus like a lightning bolt. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. People who had been looking at their phones suddenly looked up. Even the bus driver glanced in his rearview mirror with surprise. "Ronda Rousey?" An elderly man near the front repeated loudly. "The fighter? The Olympic medalist?" asked a woman with a briefcase. "The UFC champion?" added someone else from the middle of the bus. The name rippled through the bus like electricity, passed from passenger to passenger. People who had been trying to stay out of the confrontation were now craning their necks to get a better look at the woman who had been sitting quietly in workout clothes. Phones started coming out all over the bus. Not to call for help this time, but to take pictures and videos. Passengers were suddenly realizing they were witnessing something that would probably end up on the internet within hours. "I can't believe it," said the teenager who had first recognized her. "I've watched all her fights. She's like one of the most dangerous people on the planet." The elderly woman who had been worried about Ronda's safety suddenly understood why the young woman hadn't been hurt by the kick. A small smile appeared on her face as she realized that the bully had picked on exactly the wrong person. But the angry man either didn't hear the name being passed around the bus, or he didn't understand what it meant. He was too focused on his own rage to pay attention to what other people were saying. His tunnel vision was about to cost him dearly. "I don't care who you think you are," he continued yelling at Ronda, completely oblivious to the significance of what was happening around him. "Nobody ignores me when I'm talking to them. You're going to learn some respect whether you like it or not." The passengers were now looking at him with a mixture of amazement and pity. They couldn't believe that someone could be so clueless about the danger they had put themselves in. It was like watching someone poke a sleeping lion with a stick. "Dude," the teenager called out from the back, trying to warn him. "You might want to stop right there. You have no idea who you're messing with." "Shut up, kid," the angry man snapped back without even looking at him. "This is none of your business." A middle-aged woman who had been quietly watching the whole thing shook her head in disbelief. "That poor man has no idea what he's gotten himself into," she whispered to the passenger next to her. Ronda remained calm and seated, but everyone on the bus could now see that there was something different about her. The way she held herself, the alertness in her eyes, the controlled breathing, these were all signs that the other passengers were beginning to recognize as those of a trained fighter. The bus driver had heard the name being passed around and was now watching the situation much more carefully through his rearview mirror. He had heard of Ronda Rousey and knew that she was famous for being able to handle herself in dangerous situations. "Sir," the driver called out more urgently now, "I really think you should calm down and take a seat. You don't want to do anything you'll regret." But the angry man was beyond listening to reason. His pride had been hurt and he felt like everyone on the bus was ganging up on him. He didn't realize that they were actually trying to save him from making an even bigger mistake. "I'm not backing down," he declared loudly, puffing out his chest like he was trying to look more intimidating. "I don't care if she's some kind of celebrity or whatever. She's not better than me." The irony of his statement was lost on him, but not on the other passengers. They were watching someone who was completely out of his depth, challenging one of the most skilled fighters in the world without even realizing it. Phones were now recording from multiple angles. This was quickly becoming the kind of incident that would be shared millions of times on social media. But the angry man was still completely unaware that he was about to become famous for all the wrong reasons. "Last warning," Ronda said quietly, her voice carrying a tone of authority that made several passengers sit up straighter. "Walk away now and we can forget this whole thing happened." But instead of taking the lifeline she was offering him, the angry man made the decision that would seal his fate. Part 6, Swift Justice. The angry man looked at Ronda's outstretched hand offering peace and saw it as another insult. His rage had completely taken over his ability to think clearly. He was so focused on winning this confrontation that he couldn't see the obvious warning signs all around him. "Don't you dare threaten me," he snarled, his face now completely red with anger. "I'm not afraid of you or anyone else on this bus. You think you can intimidate me just because some kids think you're famous?" The passengers were watching in stunned silence. They could hardly believe that someone could be so blind to their own danger. It was like watching someone stand on railroad tracks while a train was approaching, completely refusing to move out of the way. The teenage boy in the back was now recording everything on his phone. He had a perfect angle and was capturing every word and movement. He knew this was going to be something people would want to see, especially once they understood what was really happening. Ronda remained seated, but every person on the bus could feel the change in the atmosphere. There was a tension in the air that hadn't been there before. It was the feeling you get right before a thunderstorm hits, when everything is perfectly still but charged with electricity. "This is your last chance," Ronda said in a voice so calm it was almost scary. "Sit down, apologize to that nice lady you yelled at, and we'll all get home safely tonight." Her offer was more than fair. Any reasonable person would have taken it and been grateful for the opportunity to avoid further embarrassment. But the angry man was far beyond reasonable at this point. "I'm not apologizing to anyone," he declared loudly. "And I'm definitely not taking orders from some gym rat who thinks she's tough. Maybe you need another lesson in respect." As he spoke these words, he raised his right hand as if he was about to strike her. This was the moment that everything changed. The moment when Ronda's patience finally ran out and her training took over. What happened next took place so fast that most of the passengers didn't even see it clearly. 1 second, the angry man was standing over Ronda with his hand raised, and the next second he was face down on the floor of the bus with his arm twisted behind his back. Ronda had moved with lightning speed that defied belief. She had stood up from her seat, grabbed his raised arm, and spun him around in one smooth motion. Before he could even realize what was happening, she had applied a perfect arm control technique that left him completely helpless. The whole sequence had taken less than 3 seconds from start to finish. It was so fast and so smooth that it looked almost like a dance move. But the result was unmistakable. The angry man was now completely under Ronda's control. "What the?" he started to say, but then realized that any movement he made caused sharp pain to shoot through his shoulder and arm. He was trapped in a position where Ronda could control his entire body, just by applying pressure to his arm. The bus erupted in amazed gasps and surprised shouts. Passengers who had been scared just moments before were now staring in awe at what they had just witnessed. It was like watching a magic trick, except this was completely real. "Holy cow," shouted the teenager with the phone. "Did you guys see how fast that was? That was incredible." The elderly woman who had been yelled at earlier was now smiling widely. She clapped her hands together in delight, thrilled to see that the bully had finally gotten what he deserved. "Serves him right," she said with satisfaction. Other passengers were pulling out their phones to record what was happening. Everyone wanted to capture this moment when justice was served so perfectly and so quickly. The bus had turned into an impromptu theater where everyone had front row seats to an amazing show. Ronda kept the angry man controlled on the floor, but she wasn't hurting him. Her technique was designed to restrain without causing injury. She had applied just enough pressure to keep him still, but not enough to cause any permanent damage. "Now," she said in a calm, controlled voice that everyone on the bus could hear clearly, "are you ready to calm down and behave like a civilized person?" The angry man tried to struggle against her hold, but quickly realized that any movement only made his situation worse. He was completely trapped by someone who clearly knew exactly what she was doing. "Let me go," he demanded, but his voice had lost all of its earlier aggression. Now he just sounded scared and confused. The reality of his situation was finally starting to sink in. "I'll let you go when you agree to sit quietly for the rest of the ride," Ronda replied calmly. "And when you apologize to that lady you were rude to earlier." The bus driver had pulled over to the side of the road as soon as he saw what was happening. He turned around in his seat to get a better look at the situation, and his face showed complete amazement at what he was seeing. "Should I call the police?" he asked Ronda, ready to support her however she needed. "That might be a good idea," Ronda replied, still maintaining perfect control of the angry man on the floor. "This gentleman assaulted me, and I think there are plenty of witnesses who saw what happened." Multiple passengers immediately spoke up to confirm her story. Everyone had seen the unprovoked kick, and several people had recorded the whole incident on their phones. There would be no shortage of evidence about what had really happened. The angry man was beginning to understand the full scope of his mistake. Not only had he attacked someone who was completely capable of defending herself, but he had done it in front of dozens of witnesses with cameras. His day had just gone from bad to absolutely disastrous. I didn't mean, he started to say, but the words stuck in his throat. He was starting to realize that there was no way to talk his way out of this situation. He had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Part 7. The crowd's reaction. The bus had completely transformed from a quiet afternoon commute into something that resembled a movie scene. Passengers who had been minding their own business just minutes before were now witnesses to one of the most incredible displays of self-defense they had ever seen. The applause started slowly with just one person clapping, then another, and within seconds the entire bus was filled with the sound of enthusiastic clapping and cheering. The elderly woman who had been bullied earlier was clapping the loudest, her face beaming with joy and satisfaction. "That was amazing," shouted a man in a business suit who had been quietly reading his newspaper before all this started. "I've never seen anything like that in real life." The teenage boy who had first recognized Ronda was practically bouncing in his seat with excitement. His phone was still recording, and he was providing running commentary like a sports announcer. "Guys, you're not going to believe this video when I post it," he said excitedly to his phone camera. "I just watched Ronda Rousey take down some guy who was being a total jerk on the bus. This is going to go viral for sure." Other passengers were calling their friends and family members, trying to share what they had just witnessed. The bus was buzzing with excited conversations as everyone tried to process what had happened. "Did you see how fast she moved?" asked a young woman near the front. "One second he was standing there, and the next second he was on the ground. It was like something out of an action movie. She didn't even look like she was trying hard," added another passenger. "It was so smooth and effortless, like she does this kind of thing every day." The bus driver was shaking his head in amazement. In his 20 years of driving city buses, he had seen plenty of fights and confrontations, but he had never seen someone handle an aggressive person so quickly and efficiently. "Ma'am," he called back to Ronda, "I have to say that was the most impressive thing I've ever seen on my bus. That guy picked the wrong person to mess with today." Ronda smiled modestly while still maintaining control of the angry man on the floor. She wasn't trying to show off or make a big scene. She was just doing what came naturally to her when someone became violent. "I was just defending myself," she replied simply. "I tried to avoid this situation, but he didn't give me much choice when he started getting physical." The passengers were now sharing the story with each other, filling in details for people who might have missed parts of the confrontation. Everyone wanted to make sure they understood exactly what had led up to the incredible takedown they had just witnessed. "He was being so rude to her from the moment he got on the bus," explained the elderly woman to anyone who would listen. "She was nothing but polite to him, and he just kept getting more and more aggressive. And then he had the nerve to yell at this sweet lady here," added another passenger, pointing to the grandmother. "That's when you could tell the fighter lady was getting really annoyed. But even then, she tried to give him a chance to walk away," said a man with a briefcase. "She warned him multiple times before he finally crossed the line." The story was being told and retold throughout the bus, with each person adding their own perspective on what they had seen. It was like watching the birth of a legend in real time. Some passengers were already posting about the incident on social media. Photos and short video clips were being uploaded to various platforms, along with excited descriptions of what had happened. "Just witnessed the most incredible thing on my bus ride home," typed one woman on her phone. "Some guy tried to bully Ronda Rousey and got exactly what he deserved. Justice served instantly." The angry man on the floor was beginning to understand that his humiliation was about to become very public. He could hear people talking about posting videos online, and he realized that his worst day ever was about to get even worse. Please, he said quietly to Rhonda. Can you just let me go? I promise I'll behave. I won't cause any more trouble. That's better, Rhonda replied, maintaining her professional tone. But you're going to stay right where you are until the police arrive. You assaulted me in front of all these witnesses, and there have to be consequences for that kind of behavior. The passengers continued to express their amazement at what they had witnessed. Many of them had never seen a real martial arts technique used in person before. They were fascinated by how controlled and precise Rhonda's movements had been. She could have really hurt him if she wanted to, observed a middle-aged man, but she just restrained him perfectly. That takes incredible skill and self-control. My daughter takes karate classes, said a mother with 2 children. I'm definitely going to tell her about this. It's a perfect example of how martial arts should be used, only for defense and only with the minimum force necessary. The excitement on the bus was infectious. Even passengers who had been scared during the confrontation were now feeling energized and impressed by what they had seen. It was like they had all shared a special experience that they would remember for the rest of their lives. I can't wait to tell my husband about this, said one woman. He's never going to believe that I saw Ronda Rousey in action on my way home from work. The bus had become a celebration of justice served and a bully getting his comeuppance. Everyone was enjoying the satisfaction of seeing someone who had been acting terribly get exactly what he deserved in the most spectacular way possible. Part 8. Justice and Aftermath. The sound of police sirens could be heard approaching from a distance. The bus driver had called for assistance as soon as the situation was under control, and law enforcement was responding quickly to the incident. The passengers could see flashing lights reflecting off the buildings as 2 police cars pulled up behind the stopped bus. 4 police officers boarded the bus, and their expressions showed immediate interest when they saw the scene before them. A woman in workout clothes was calmly restraining a man on the floor, while dozens of passengers watched with excited faces. What's the situation here? Asked the lead officer, a veteran policeman who had seen many unusual calls during his career. This gentleman assaulted me, Rhonda explained calmly, still maintaining her hold on the angry man. He was being aggressive toward other passengers, and when I tried to help calm things down, he kicked me. I defended myself using minimal force. The angry man tried to speak up from his position on the floor. She attacked me. I barely touched her and she threw me down like I was nothing. This is police brutality or something. His complaint was immediately met with protests from every passenger on the bus. Multiple voices spoke up at once, all eager to set the record straight about what had really happened. That's not true at all, said the elderly woman firmly. He was being horrible to everyone and she was trying to help. He kicked her first. I got the whole thing on video, announced the teenager, holding up his phone. You can see exactly what happened. He was the aggressor the entire time. The police officers looked around at the bus full of witnesses, many of whom were holding up their phones with recorded evidence. It was rare to have such clear documentation of an incident with so many reliable witnesses. Ma'am, said one of the officers to Rhonda, you can release him now. We'll take it from here. Rhonda smoothly released her hold and stepped back, allowing the officers to take control of the situation. The angry man tried to get up quickly, but found that his arm and shoulder were stiff from being held in the restraining position. As he stood up and looked around the bus, the full reality of his situation finally hit him. Every single person was looking at him with expressions ranging from disapproval to outright disgust. Multiple phones were still recording his humiliation. His face turned pale as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. Wait, he said suddenly, his voice filled with dawning horror. Did someone say Ronda Rousey? The UFC fighter? The teenage boy laughed and held up his phone. Dude, you just tried to fight one of the most dangerous women on the planet. This video is going to be everywhere by tonight. The color drained completely from the angry man's face. He looked back at Rhonda with newfound understanding and terror. All of his aggressive behavior suddenly made perfect sense in the worst possible way. He had picked a fight with someone who could have seriously injured him but had chosen to show mercy instead. Oh no, he whispered, putting his head in his hands. Oh no, oh no, oh no. What have I done? The police officers were now interviewing passengers and collecting statements. Everyone was eager to tell their version of events, and every single account painted the same picture. An unprovoked attack by an Aggressive man against a woman who had tried to avoid conflict. We have more than enough witnesses and video evidence, the lead officer told his partner. This is going to be a very straightforward case. They placed handcuffs on the angry man and began reading him his rights. As they did, he kept looking back at Ronda with a mixture of fear and regret. He was finally understanding the true consequences of his actions. "Ma'am," said one of the officers to Ronda, "we'll need you to come to the station to give a formal statement. But based on what we're seeing here, this looks like a clear case of self-defense." "Of course," Ronda replied professionally. "I'm happy to cooperate fully with your investigation." As the police led the angry man off the bus, passengers began sharing their contact information with the officers, volunteering to serve as witnesses if needed. The teenager with the video handed over his phone to let the police copy the footage. "This is going to be the most documented assault case we've ever had," joked one of the officers as he looked at all the video evidence. Once the police had left with their suspect, the bus driver made an announcement to the remaining passengers. "Folks, I apologize for the delay, but I think we all just witnessed something pretty special here. Let's give this lady a round of applause for handling that situation so professionally." The bus erupted in cheers and applause once again. Passengers were coming up to Ronda to thank her for defending the elderly woman and for showing them what real courage looked like. "You were incredible," said the grandmother, tears of gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you for standing up for me when that awful man was being so rude." "Anyone would have done the same thing," Ronda replied modestly. "Nobody should have to deal with that kind of behavior." As the bus continued its route, passengers were already sharing the story on social media. Videos of the incident were being uploaded to various platforms, and the story was spreading rapidly across the internet. Within just a few hours, the hashtag #BusJustice was trending on multiple social media platforms. The video of the takedown had been viewed millions of times, with people around the world commenting on the perfect example of instant karma. News outlets picked up the story by evening, with headlines like "UFC champion delivers perfect justice to bus bully," and "When bullies pick the wrong target." The incident became a viral sensation that would be talked about for months. The angry man, whose name was released after his arrest, became an internet meme representing what happens when bullies choose their targets poorly. His mugshot was shared widely, along with warnings about the dangers of aggressive behavior. Meanwhile, Ronda became even more beloved by her fans for her restraint and professionalism. She had shown that true strength wasn't about hurting people, but about protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. The incident served as a powerful reminder that you never know who you're dealing with when you choose to be aggressive toward strangers. Sometimes the quiet person sitting next to you might be capable of far more than you could ever imagine. And sometimes, just sometimes, bullies get exactly what they deserve in the most spectacular way possible.